In this video, we will talk about an introduction on what are Markov chains. We will discuss some of its examples, terminologies, and basic ideas as we go may be somewhat realistic. Suppose this is what we get here. Suppose that an orange juice company controls 20% of the orange juice market. Okay, so what that means is if there was $100 million worth of orange juice sold last year, they made $20 million of that $100 million. So they have 20% share of the orange juice in the market. And suppose that you are thinking about doing a nice aggressive ad campaign, but that supposed ad campaign is going to be very expensive, so they are not sure if they should do it. So there are these companies out there that do market research, and suppose they hire a market research company, and this is based on some data that they collect. This is the conclusion from the research company. Suppose the company that controls 20% of the orange juice market is generically called Brand A, and suppose the market research company decides this. They say if somebody's already using Brand A, once you start this ad campaign, there is a 90% chance that they are going to go ahead and stay with that same brand. Okay, so there is a good chance that you're gonna have a repeat customers as what it says. If you launch this campaign, suppose they also determine that if somebody is not using your brand of orange juice, there's a 70% probability that they'll switch over to your type of orange juice. And maybe just generically, let's suppose this is based on a family for suppose people buy orange juice once a week for time reference. Let's introduce notations here. Let us use A, which represents that somebody uses brand A, and let us use A prime to denote that somebody uses same other brand. What we can make is sometimes what's called a little transition diagram just to illustrate here. And usually what it is you have a couple of different circles. So in this case, we're gonna have brand A, and we're gonna make a circle to the only other state in this case, so you can be in two states. Generically, what it's called in this case, you can be in brand A or not in brand A. Certainly, there has to be two states in general. We're going to make a little arrows to denote probabilities. So based on what we said earlier, it is said that if you start with brand A, it says there's a 90% chance that you'll come back to brand A. So what we do is we make a little arrow and we put on there the number 0.9 to indicate that there's a 90% probability that you'll sort of make a loop and stay with that. Well, if there's a 90% probability you'll stay with the brand A, that would mean that it's possible that you can switch to something that's not A. By default, that means there's a 10% chance or 0.1 probability that you'll switch. We said if you're using some other brand, there's a 70% chance that you'll actually switch into brand A, which means by default, there's a 30% probability that you'll keep using some other brand. This is what's known as transition diagram. It represents the probabilities of you staying in your current state or possibly switching to some other state. A lot of times what we'll do is we're gonna start up using matrices. So we're gonna set up a matrix P to denote probabilities here and fill it in here. We're gonna put a little A up here and A prime or not A there. But the left side is gonna represent your current state and the top is gonna represent the next state. So all we're gonna do is just really this little transition diagram in a different way that you can do some math with. So basically we said that if your current state is state A, there's a 90% probability that you'll stay in state A. If you're in state A, in the beginning we said that there's a 10% that your next state will be 0.1. It says that if you're not using brand A currently, there's a 70% probability that you'll end up using brand A and 30% for not keeping using brand A. This is sometimes what's known as the transition probability matrix. It's a matrix and it's telling you the probability that you'll transition from one state to the next. Another notation is we'll use S sub 0. It's called the initial state distribution matrix or initial state probability matrix. This has to do with basically the market share And we said initially that brand A had 20% or 0.2 to the market, which means other brands, not A, other brands control 80% of the market. Let's calculate the probability that someone uses brand A after 1 week using our tree diagram. We're gonna calculate the probability wherein there's two different ways it can happen. Either somebody used brand A originally and they continue using brand A, or originally you could have had somebody that didn't use brand A but end up switching to brand A. What we do is we multiply the respective branches, so the probability of using brand A after 1 week, it would equal, you multiply the 0.2 times 0.9 and then we add to that the probability of this other branch. We multiply 0.8 times 0.7. So 0.2 times 0.9 is equals to 0.18 and 0.8 times 0.7 is equals to 0.57. So we're getting 0.74. And what that says is, if you do launch advertising campaign after 1 week, you can expect 74% of the market share that belong to brand A. So what that says, so we'll call this S sub 1. This is gonna be the first state matrix in our problem. This would be 1 week later conceptually. It says 1 week later, brand A is gonna have 74% of the market share. You can calculate the probability that somebody doesn't use brand A using the same multiplication technique, but by default, it says that there should be 26% that somebody does not use brand A. That is a big jump from 20% market share to the 74 market share. Let us point out one other thing real quick and we're nearly done in this video. Notice if we multiply our initial distribution matrix 0.2 and 0.8 times the probability matrix, so what that means is we would be multiplying 0.2 times 0.8 and multiply that by probability matrix 0.9, 0.7, 0.1, and 0.3. If we multiply this, remember again matrix multiplication, we multiply rows by columns. We will get 0.2 times 0.9 plus 0.8 times 0.7 will get 0.74. And then if we take our first row times our second column, we're gonna get 0.26. So the moral of the story, we calculated the market share after 1 week by using this tree diagram. And this is gonna represent the first state matrix. And if you launch this ad campaign assuming everything is correct, the next people to go to buy orange juice at random, it's gonna turn out the orange juice that gets sold, you can expect to have 74% of market share for brand A and 26% for some other brand. Suppose we want to know what share of market we're gonna have 2 weeks later. Now we're gonna kind of starting back over in a sense because we're gonna assume from week to week that as long as this advertising campaign is going on, that this probability is gonna stay valid. So if we start with brand A, there's a 90% chance you'll stay with it. 10% chance you'll switch to something else if you don't use brand A. There's a 70% chance you'll switch into it, and there's a 30% chance you'll switch into something else. So if we want to know the market share 2 weeks later, all we need to do is take the proportion of the people, the market share that happened 1 week later, which is 0.74 times 0.26, and then again we will simply multiply it by this probability matrix 0.9, 0.1, 0.7, 0.3. We get 0.848 and 0.152. So this says 2 weeks later, brand A controls almost 85% of the orange juice market, while other brands just have a touch over 15%.